Hello and welcome to another episode of the Dominic Mills Podcast. Sports talk and more for those who want to know it all. Back with another fantastic guest. Mike O'Dowd is a retired Air Force officer of 24 years, serving from 1985 to 2010, with 7 combat deployments as an A-10 pilot. He was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross Award for Valor in Combat. Today, he serves as the pastor of Leptondale Bible Church, and he's a newly published author, with his debut novel, The Gospel, a redemption and restoration story, hitting the shelves last year. We discuss his life, experiences in the Air Force, and much more. But first, let's blast that intro.
Samuel cuts it back. Ohio State wins. Barry looks, fires, touchdown Buckeye. Oh my goodness! Barry Rozier, how do you do? Cousins, Ohio State, look out, ball! Oh, and you don't like that. You don't like NBA basketball.
All right, hello, welcome to another episode of the Dominic Mills Podcast. I'm joined by Mike O'Dowd, former Air Force officer, author, and pastor. Thank you for joining me today, Mike.
Thank you, Dominic, for having me, brother.
And before we get started, I also wanted to thank you for your service. That's something that it's not always appreciated the way it should be.
Well, thanks, Tom. I appreciate that, buddy. And again, thanks again for the invite.
Yeah, of course. So I read that you're from New Jersey. What was it like growing up?
I am. I'm from North Jersey, Dom. I'm from that part of Jersey that most people make jokes about, up around the turnpike where there's a lot of factories, refinery towers, those kinds of things. So New York City suburbs, I could climb up on the top of my elementary school and I could see the Empire State Building. We were that close to the city. So it was good though. I mean, I enjoyed it. It was what I knew growing up. But life in the service kind of took me away from that and took me all the way around the world really and exposed me to a lot of different things.
Yeah, it's really cool to see. How did that experience moving around the world change the way you saw home?
Oh, New Yorkers are a little different. It would not be unusual for someone in the New York metropolitan area to say something like, I don't know why you would want to live anywhere else. We have everything, and there is a little bit of that mindset, when you grow up in the shadow of the city there. And, what I got to see just going not only around the country, but around the world is just the ways in which culture is so different. The way that people interact, food is so very different. I really gained just a great love of food in all the places, that we ended up going to around the world. I'm a foodie, Dom. I know that's not on my profile, but you can add that to the list of things I love talking about.
Okay, for sure. What would you say is one food that you wouldn't have expected to like as much as you do now? But like if you mention it, it just gets the mouth watering.
Yeah, man. I grew up in a home where food was not that interesting, and so I didn't know any better. And when I got out and about, I got to experience again that great diversity. And then the food that really, if you ask me, what's the most surprising? What do you love the most? Cajun food. I love Cajun food. My first assignment as an A-10 pilot was in Louisiana. And just got exposed to that. And man, I love it so much. Even now, I will go out of my way to mail order stuff to get it to my house because you can't get good Cajun food up in New York. You just can't do it. At least I haven't found it yet.
Okay. All right. I got to visit New Orleans once a few years ago when I was living in Tallahassee. We were trying to avoid a hurricane, which is funny enough. But we didn't end up getting to stay long enough to really immerse ourselves into the Cajun cuisine, but I every opportunity I get now, I try to try something out. But like a recent guest I had on, Terry Tucker, you also went to the Citadel. What was your college experience like, and were you looking at any other schools before you decided to go there?
Well, Terry and I overlapped only slightly. He was a senior when I was a freshman, and the experience of life in the Citadel as a freshman is not a wonderful thing. It's a hard year. You are getting thrown into a regimented environment. You're really getting changed in so many ways. That the culture there in a military school wants to do that. How I ended up there is a really long story, Dom. The short version of it is that when I was young, when I was in high school, I really wasn't, I didn't have a strong sense of direction. I knew one thing. I knew from an early age I wanted to fly jets. And other than that, I didn't have any strong passions or direction in my life. And a buddy of mine I grew up with, man, we've known each other since before kindergarten. And he wanted to go there because his brother had just graduated a year before we got there. And the extent to which I put thought into that, Dom, and I hate to admit it, but it's true, is I simply said, well, my best friend's going there. It's a military school. I want to fly jets, so why not? And that's how I ended up there. That's how a kid from North Jersey ends up in Charleston, South Carolina. And you talk about culture shock. That was a huge difference from what I was used to growing up. Just very, very, very different.
Okay. You spoke to always having like a desire to fly jets. What sparked that in you?
That's hard to say. As a Christian, Dom, I always attribute those things to God's overall direction in my life, even when I didn't understand it. But I love to tell people the story. I got into it. I really had just had a love for airplanes, and I was 12 years old. I was in a mall in Paramus, New Jersey, and I was with my mom and dad, and we were in the bookstore. And I kid you not, I walked up to a shelf in the bookstore, the airplane section, and I pulled a book off the shelf, and I think it was called the World Combat Aircraft Directory. And I pulled that book off. I opened it up, and I opened it up to an A-10. The plane I ended up flying, 12-year-old kid. And I looked at it and I told my mom and dad, I said, I'm going to fly that jet. And lo and behold, over the course of years and kind of another long meandering story that I could tell you, I know we don't have the time. I ended up getting my very first choice of airplane out of pilot training, and that was to fly an A-10.
That's really cool.
Yeah. So I tell folks that, my first dream was to be a Major League Baseball player. I wanted to play center field for the Mets. Talent, topped out in high school. But honestly, truly, my real dream was to fly jets, and I got to do it, and got to do it for a long time, and it was wonderful.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about the process of becoming a pilot. Like, did you enlist like right after you graduated college? Is that like something that's tied into your, I don't know, however they do your tuition at the Citadel?
Yeah, in the Air Force, and I'm, the Navy is the same way as well. To be a pilot, you have to be an officer. To be an officer, you have to have a bachelor's degree. And so going to college and getting a 4-year degree is a necessary prerequisite. There's a number of ways you can go about that. You can go to the Air Force Academy, in which case you're going to go into the service when you graduate, or you can go to a college, a civilian college with an ROTC program, which is what I did, the Citadel, and went through ROTC for 4 years. And so I was commissioned as a second lieutenant the day I graduated from college after going through ROTC. And then there are also ways in which you can get a 4-year degree, and then the Air Force will put you through officer training school as well if you're accepted for that, which is a little bit of a non-traditional route. You have a lot of enlisted folks in the service that will actually take that route. They'll get their degree while they're enlisted, and then they'll go to officer training school and get commissioned there. So that's your first step: get a degree, which is a necessary prerequisite for getting commissioned. And then once you're commissioned, then actually getting selected for training. Going to pilot training, at least at the time when I was in that mix back in the mid 80s, was very competitive. And I was able to get a pilot slot, and then getting into pilot training and making your way through that without washing out along the way is another hurdle that you have to cross. And then to fly fighters, you have to do well enough in pilot training to be regarded as qualified or capable, have the potential to go into that, because it's the most demanding form of flying. So there's all sorts of hurdles along the way, Dom, and the long and short of it is, the process starts with going to college, and the process ends in a sense when you graduate from pilot training. And all told, that for me was goodness, about a 6 year, little more than a 6 year process just there. And then you get to a unit where you have to get qualified to fly the aircraft. For me, it was the A-10. And then even once you're qualified, think of it from, maybe an athletic analogy. You may be good enough to be there, but are you good enough to really be productive and be a meaningful part of the team? And so it really takes you a couple of years before you even build your skills in the aircraft, get your qualifications up to the point where you really have command of the mission and you do it well. It is a long and hard road, and there are all sorts of places along the way to get tripped up and kind of to get kicked out of the process. So it's not an easy thing to do. And again, I just thank God that he gave me the ability and the desire and the drive to stick with it and do it. And I loved what I did, for 24 years in the service. I wouldn't trade it.
Okay. What would you say is the biggest lesson you learned from all of that training? Like, because obviously, like, everybody that I speak to that's either went through any form of specialization in a field that's long and grueling, they have like this, I don't know, this level of perspective that somebody who hasn't gone through that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Persevere. Persevere, have real expectations. Anything, that might be an overstatement. Most things that are worth doing and worth doing well have a demanding course, a demanding discipline that they have to go through to get to that. I don't care what you do. Successful athlete, successful musician, whatever the case may be. Be real about that. Know going into it that it's going to be hard. Know going into it that you're going to experience frustrations, that you're going to experience disappointment. Know that part of the process is not whether or not those things happen, but how you respond to them. And really just to press on. I can't tell you how many times along the way, you started wrestling with those thoughts of, man, there's got to be something easier in life to do. Let me just do that. Or you get frustrated or disappointed and you begin to convince yourself, maybe I don't have what it takes to do this, to get to this point. And, certainly those are possibilities, but you can't listen to those voices, those inclinations that you're going to encounter along the way that say, you know what, just stop. You got to persevere. You got to press on. And eventually, when you do that, Dom, and you go through it and you look back, you begin to realize that you have a track record, you have, a resume of making your way through those things, where you just begin to realize that, hey, I can face these things and I can overcome them when I do. And my goodness, I might have just described life to you, honestly, in a lot of ways. That's just the way it is.
Yeah, that's something that is really common in that thought process. Is they're like, you get through this really tough experience and it really gives you a set of skills really to meander through the rest of life. Really,
I am a stubbornly determined personality, Dom. And God has a sense of humor. So I'm a retired fighter pilot. After 24 years of service, I am. Goodness, how old was I? I'm pushing 50, and I get this call to go into pastoral ministry and to go to a seminary, and not just anyone. I go to Dallas Theological Seminary, which is a 4-year master's program, and I had already, as a result of being an Air Force officer, because the services emphasize education and promotion a great deal, I'd already gone through 3 master's programs in the Air Force. I was schooled out, brother. And and God calls me into maybe one of the most challenging, theological degrees that you can go through. And that was hard. And I remember going into one of my first classes, and the professor, mostly surrounded by younger folks, in their 20s. And the professor's going around the class and asks everybody, hey, what do you want to do? And, and gets to me, and I said, I want to be a pastor. He looks at me and he goes, how old are you? And I said, well, I'm going to turn 50 in April. And he goes, good luck with that, which is pretty discouraging.
Mm-hmm.
But the way I'm wired, that didn't discourage me. That just kind of doubled down my effort to say, you know what, I'm going to get through this.
Mm-hmm. Gives you a
And,
challenge.
it's a challenge, man. And if God calls you into something, he's going to equip you to get through it anyway. So I've also learned to trust in that over the years.
Okay. Yeah. How would you say your faith has changed throughout your life? Because obviously it's played a huge role. What has the role of faith, like, how has that role changed for you? Like,
Yeah. Well, it changed, when I was, goodness, probably about a little over 30 years ago, 32 years ago. And my first combat deployment in the A-10, and this is going to date me, but it was Operation Desert Storm back in 1990-91. And my squadron was one of the first units to get deployed into Southwest Asia. We went to an air base in Saudi Arabia in August of 1990. And, at the time I was a very prototypical fighter pilot. I was wild. I was a hair on fire kind of guy. My life was very edgy. And that's kind of who I was. And in a lot of ways, those character qualities, a fair number of them weren't very good. And again, another long story that we don't have time to talk about. But I got brought into some circumstances in that deployment, in particular, when we crossed the Atlantic on the way there, and we flew into and through a band of probably about 500-mile wide thunderstorms over the middle of the Atlantic, because we had to. It was a national emergency. We were basically deploying to Southwest Asia because we were the fastest way to get a force there that could stop the Iraqis from continuing their invasion into Saudi Arabia, which is what we expected to happen. But the long and short of it is we went through the kind of weather that we would never go through otherwise. And it was terrifying. And, I got brought to a point, buddy, where I was just at the end of my rope flying through that stuff, as most of the guys were. And God got my attention. And, for the first time in my life, we eventually get into Saudi Arabia on the second leg, and we're there. And a buddy of mine invited me to go to a chapel service, and I started attending chapel, started listening to the messages. I had just gotten married. My wife gave me a Bible to take along the way. I started reading it. None of the kind of things that come with, seeking God and being in relationship with Him were anywhere near my life up to that point.
mm-hmm.
And Dom, he gripped me, and in particular the message of Jesus Christ and what He's done to deliver us, honestly, from a nature that's greatly in need of redemption. I embraced that, and God did what He alone could do. And so really a lot of the things that I've shared with you, whether it's perseverance or determination, whatever the case may be, I did not possess the character to be able to do those kinds of things apart from Him.
Mm-hmm.
And He changed me in that way and entered into my life in such vivid ways that proved that He wasn't just an intellectual idea or a concept or just this thing that people talk about and in a superficial way say, I believe in this or that or the other. I came to know that God is a real person, and that through faith in Jesus Christ, we can come to know Him personally. And through that, buddy, for 32 years, He has been leading me through all of this and changing me and directing me, and sometimes setting me on a course where I just want to look up and say, are you crazy? And He laughs at that kind of stuff and says, no, but do what I say anyway. Mm-hmm. And how has my faith changed me? It's changed me in that He has proved Himself to be real and true to me over and over and over again. And I've just come to the point in life. I've been progressively brought to the point in life to just trust Him and follow His lead. And I do. And so I'm a pastor. Okay. And everything that I've just shared with you now, my great passion is to impart the reality, the possibility, the wonder of that kind of a relationship to people that the Lord brings under my care.
Okay. That's a really powerful message. Like, wow.
Well,
Um,
it comes from a very powerful author, and that author isn't
mhm.
me.
Okay. Um, wow. So when you're obviously, like you said, you wouldn't have ever flown through those conditions like in normal circumstances. What is the process of that like? Like put us in your mind as you're flying. I know it's obviously a hectic scenario, but
Yeah.
what's the process like?
Well, the process is it begins with looking at the news differently than everybody else does.
Hmm.
The things going on in the Ukraine right now. If I was on active duty, the moment I began even seeing the hint of those kinds of things, my mindset is to start getting ready. You start packing your bag, you start preparing, you start studying the environment there before you go. For me, going to Saudi Arabia for Desert Shield, Desert Storm in 1990 and 91 meant diving into all of the details we had on the Iraqi Army and Air Force and all of those, everything about operating in that environment. So it begins there. And we didn't have much time to do that. We had a couple of weeks, and then we were, ordered to deploy. And what that looks like is from our base in central Louisiana, we launched 24 airplanes, flew them to a base in South Carolina, spent a day there, and then launched out of that base on the coast of South Carolina to fly across the ocean to a base in Spain. It ultimately turned out to be almost a 14-hour mission. It's a long time flying in a
Mm-hmm.
single seat airplane, when you get across. And we took off on a nice day in late August. It was in late afternoon. And we hit that weather I described to you about halfway through. It was a little after midnight when we got into it. So we were tired because we didn't have a chance to adjust sleep cycles. Mm-hmm. And the way you get 24 airplanes across the ocean, because we don't have the range to cross it ourselves, is we would launch in 6 groups of 6 with about 30-minute spacing. I was in the third group of 6 airplanes. So I took off about an hour after the first group of 6 did. And then you rejoin with a tanker, which is a large airline size airplane that has a refueling port on it that you can get gas from while you're flying. That's the easiest way to explain it. Mm-hmm. And those 6 airplanes then will stick with that tanker, and that tanker will fly us all the way across. And we ended up refueling, I think, about 8 times along the way. Some of that in that horrific weather, which was part of the real frightening aspect of it. You're flying next to something that's the size of an airliner. Mm-hmm. And for me, when we were flying alongside of it, I was flying 3 feet away from the wingtip of that airliner with lightning, icing building up on the airplane. There's a phenomenon called St. Elmo's fire, which is like an electrical discharge that builds up in the airplane. And if you can imagine this little blue dancing flame that runs along the wing, comes through the cockpit, goes out the other side and runs along that wing. You've got that going on. The thunder was so loud I could hear it through the helmet. And the turbulence was so bad that sometimes the wingtip of the tanker, because I was flying right on the right wing of the tanker, and then I had a guy on my right wing, and there was another guy in his right wing. So we were 3 airplanes lined up on one wing, and then the other 3 were on the other wing. And the clouds were so thick that you could only see about 3 feet. And so all I could see was the wing, the tanker. And sometimes the wingtip was up, sometimes it was down, and sometimes it disappeared. And what really brought me to the end of my rope was I was just convinced, Dom, that the next time I saw the wingtip of that airplane, it was going to come through the canopy and it was going to kill me. And that was a moment where I just cried out to a God that I never bothered to seek, know, or understand. And I said, I need help. And then a second, Dom, I went from being borderline incapacitated to solid and steady as a rock. I can't explain that. It was not an innate ability I possessed in that moment. My innate ability was to fall apart in that moment because it was just terrifying. It was the most terrifying thing I'd ever done. So we made it through those storms, got to the other end, landed in Morón, Spain, after, again, an incredibly long flight. And then we did a day and a half in Spain, and then it was another almost 12-hour mission, same type of routine. Now, joining with a tanker, getting gas along the way, and flying into Saudi Arabia. And then, that experience was very different. Whereas the first leg was over the Atlantic, it was all over water. This one was over parts of the world I'd never seen. The Mediterranean coastline, Greece and Italy, the coast, the northern coast of Africa there, Egypt in particular. And this is kind of a funny story. Stop me if I'm getting off script for you here.
No, this is perfect. This is perfect.
But our 6 airplanes were flying with our tanker, and this is way back in the day. We used to have the youngest guy. He would usually be flying in the number 6 position, and he would have at the time a little camcorder on his leg and a selection of cassette tapes. And we had it wired to where he could play it, and it would play across an interflight radio that we could all listen to. And so the guy that was doing that, he was playing a list of songs, and it was really kind of eerie. I don't know if you've ever heard Jimi Hendrix's All Along the Watchtower, but it is really a dark and foreboding song. Okay. And it's when we first see the coast of Egypt and just this big expanse of nothing. It's just desert. It's wide open. It's so very different from anything we've ever seen that Hendrix song starts. And it was just a perfect accompaniment. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of there that the whole tone of things changed, because it was at that point we realized, you know what, guys, we're not just flying to get somewhere. We're now flying into a war zone. Mm-hmm. And up here, everything changed. And the closer we got to Saudi Arabia and our base there, the more the tension raised along the way. The closer you got to the fight, the more you kind of got into the mindset that you were really going in harm's way. And so that's kind of how you get there, but that's also kind of some of the psychology of getting there along the way as well. It was a deployment like none other, and every guy, Dom, in the squadron will tell you that even flying in combat was not as frightening as simply the mission of getting there and going through those storms and getting through that weather. It was terrifying.
I couldn't imagine, because once you were talking about the second leg of that, you're flying across the coast. Like, that's got to be such a, you could see so much of the world, and the previous flight you couldn't see 3 feet in front of you. That's got to be incredibly scary. And you guys are flying. I can't. How fast are you guys flying in when you guys are going through that?
The A-10's not known for its speed. It's known for its deadliness. Mm-hmm. So we're flying. We're probably cruising at a speed. We measure airspeed in knots, probably about 350 miles an hour. So not too terribly fast.
Still pretty fast though. Like when you really think about it, yeah, like
faster than most other people are ever going to go.
Yeah,
a race car driver. But it was, when we saw that scene of the African coast and the desert, the Egyptian desert there, the phrase from The Wizard of Oz, "We're not in Kansas anymore," kind of comes up. We weren't. It was things were dramatically different from that moment on.
Yeah. So when you're flying over Egypt, did you by any chance get to see the pyramids at all, like, or too far away?
Didn't get to see the pyramids because they for lots of reasons, in particular diplomatic sensitivity, we did not go in near any population centers. We were routed around all of that. But the coolest thing I did see crossing Egypt was out in the distance, and you don't really know what it is when you first see it. But you're looking out in the distance, it's probably still a good 40 miles away. And you notice this dark band running across your field of view through the front of the canopy. And your first reaction is, what's that? And when you get closer, you realize it's the Nile. Because the Nile is like a fertile path through Egypt. It's desert, and then boom, it's green. And so the dark strip you see is the greenery that the Nile affords, for the people who live along there. That was really cool. And then, so that was about the only significant landmark that we saw going through Egypt.
Okay, still that's really cool. Like
priceless memory.
Yeah, Egypt's top of my list for places I want to go visit. I don't know, just whenever it's available. Really, I guess you can take flights over there now, I believe. But
That would be
So,
fascinating.
yeah. How many total hours would you say you've spent in a cockpit?
Um, in the cockpit is more than flying time because you spend a lot of time in the flying business on the ground, getting ready to, to taxi out, take off, those kinds of things. And likewise coming back. And then there are a lot of times, especially in the A-10, over the course of the years, we had an alert mission. And so if you were on ground alert, you spent a lot of time sitting in an airplane with, an auxiliary power unit running, which had all the systems up and running and gave you the ability to, if you got launched, to just fire up the engines and go. So spent a lot of time in the cockpit, flying hours just under 4,000.
Mm.
So,
Wow.
which is, again, is really cool. Total time in the cockpit, probably take half of that again, just doing other things related to getting ready to fly or recovering from a mission. Cockpit time, it's all there. Takes a toll on the back too, buddy, by the way.
That's yeah, I was just doing some quick math for the people at home. 4,000 hours is over 166 days. That's
Bless
pretty
you, brother.
that's pretty
I'm not
special.
that fast on my feet anymore.
Oh my goodness. So you were a pilot for a really long time. What are some of the favorite aircraft that you have flown? Like I know you have that special connection with the A-10, but are there any other memorable ones?
The A-10 was the one that I did the majority of my time in. I did have an opportunity to fly a P-51, which is a World War II era airplane. A little bit. That was fun. The rest of my time is really in the training aircraft that I flew in, just getting, going through pilot training and those kinds of things. There were 3 different aircraft. My favorite was the T-38. It's they call it the Talon. It's got a lot of nicknames. We called it the White Rocket. It was designed, honestly, back in the 50s when the Air Force was building planes to just simply fly straight and fast. And so the Talon is this, no kidding, really thin, sleek, sports car looking kind of airplane with stubby little wings that can just go fast as can be. It was a fun airplane to fly. I got to fly it as a student, and I did get to do one assignment for 3.5 years as an instructor, which was a great experience because it was in a NATO unit in North Texas. And as a NATO unit, then the makeup of the students and the instructors were representative of all the NATO nations. So, I got to fly with British and German, Greek, Turkish, Italian, Dutch, Norwegian pilots, basically representatives of all of those nations and all of those students as well. And it was a really cool experience flying and working in a multinational environment. But flying that airplane was just a blast, buddy. I miss that too, and all the things that it could do. It was a good time.
Okay.
Flying is fun, Dom.
Yeah.
It was my work for 24 years, but I was blessed to do something that was just absolutely fun. There's nothing quite like, being at 100 feet and upside down and going so fast that everything's a blur. It's really cool.
Yeah, I honestly can't even say that I've ever even actually been in an airplane itself. It's crazy to admit as a grown man I haven't, but trying those. So really, my question is, what's the difference between the flight simulators like you guys go through when you're training and like you see like a box like at the oh man, it's escaping me now. Like at like the Wonder Works or other places that have like those quote unquote flight simulators. How in depth do those go versus like how you guys like either start your training off or finish it off?
Well, again, back when I was getting started, those trainers were not really particularly high fidelity, buddy. They were very low tech. This is way before, we were into the digital and information age. So back in the day, they were very rudimentary. They were of a quality far below what you might be able to experience, in some type of a private venue that can offer those kinds of things now. But in the last dozen years or so of my service, the simulator became very prominent and became a really high quality, high fidelity tool to train in. Probably the big difference between what we have and what you might experience in either through software on your laptop or a simulator, again in a private venue, is the level of fidelity and faithfulness to what the aircraft is actually capable of doing. And a fair amount of that is classified, which also kind of restricts what you can do. But in terms of quality of visuals and and the way they can represent an environment, there's probably not a whole lot of difference.
Okay.
The one thing the simulator can't replicate, no matter how high a quality and experience it is in replicating the cockpit, the visuals that you see through the canopy and what have you, is just the sheer physical dynamic of flying, in particular, a high performance single seat airplane. The physical stresses, you've got to be in good shape. Fighter pilots in a lot of sense are very much like athletes. You have to stay in good condition, to bear the strain. Just for example, if you take the weight of a human head, and I forget exactly how much our head weighs, I think it's probably about 15 pounds, thereabouts, and you pull 6 or 7 Gs, well, that head now turns into 90 to 100 pounds, and it's on the same neck. Yeah. Your neck muscles need to be able to endure the strain of all the maneuvering that the pressure of multiple Gs on the human body are going to exert. And then there's just, and there's also the aspect of some of the things you need to do in the airplane to keep your blood from flowing and pooling in the extremities of your body when you're pulling Gs, because when you're pulling 6, 7 Gs, what the human body does is the blood tends to drive towards the feet, towards the hands, towards the extremities, away from the heart. And there are exercises that you need to do while you're maneuvering to kind of keep, in conjunction with the G suit, to keep the pressure on that so that the blood remains up, in your head and in your heart, so that you're not blacking out, for example. And, a fair number of accidents over the course of history with fighters have been, guys that have what they call a G-lock. They've not been able to stay ahead of that, and they've blacked out and were not able to recover their senses in enough time to survive it.
So they're doing like exercises to make sure how while they're flying.
All right, you want to know the funny inside story to basically what those exercises are, Don?
Yes, please.
If you are sitting on the toilet and you're having a bowel movement, and I'm not going to get graphic with you here, and you're straining, that is that's very similar to what you do in the airplane.
Wow.
You engage in a strain with your legs and with your abdomen. And you are going through a period of sustaining that strain, releasing it very briefly to draw a breath and exhale, and then you go back into that strain. And so your G-strain maneuver is to do that repeatedly while you're doing high G maneuvering, and it's exhausting, and which is again another reason why you need to be in good shape. And you need to not only do that, but you need to fly the airplane, and you need to not only fly the airplane, but you need to fly it to a level of skill and command where you're using it as a weapon. So most people don't know that, but the fighter business is one where physical conditioning is a vital part of your ability to do the mission.
I would have never even guessed that you would have to do that, and that sounds incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
So we were talking a little bit how the technology, specifically of the fighter simulator, has changed over the course of your time throughout the military. What was the feeling how different was your first flight? Obviously, we talked about how difficult that was, but from your very last flight, like in terms of everything, like the way the technology was handled, the maneuvers that you guys were being asked to do, like how you guys maneuvered.
Yeah, the technology was the big difference, Don. Again, when I first began flying back in the 80s, the way aircraft typically made major changes, they were industrial age changes. They were changes to the airframe, they were changes to the engine, to make them faster, to make them more maneuverable, to make them more durable, those kinds of things. The big change that began in the 90s and really now continues, if you take Moore's law, that information doubles every 18 months. The big change that digital technology and the information age brought to the flying business is the ways in which aircraft change now. The most significant ways is that they change as information systems. When I started flying the A-10, the changes that occurred in the aircraft to improve it. They were very slow. They were very methodical. They didn't happen frequently. By the end, if you think about your iPhone and how often you have to update the operating system on that, that's kind of what like fighter aircraft are today. Constant updates to the operating system to make the airplane more effective as a weapons system. And they are. It makes keeping up with the changes a whole lot more demanding. Much of the flying business rests on habit patterns and muscle memory. And it's very difficult then when your muscle memory has to change, every 6 months because you get a brand new change, a software update that changes the way the aircraft works, the way you interface with it, with all of the switches and what have you that are on the throttle, on the stick, and on the other parts of the cockpit. So that's the big change. And the technology changed the way that we would fight as well. It has made aircraft far more precise. It's given us the ability to be more precise over greater distances. And so, my last combat missions were very different from the first. The first combat missions were not too much different from, what they might have been like in World War II. You press close enough to your target, to engage it effectively because you need to do that. Reducing the range makes you more accurate. Technology, without getting into details that I can't, but technology gives you the ability to reach out and be effective with the weapons that you employ on your aircraft at much greater ranges.
Okay.
And that was night and day different from the way I was taught when I was young and first coming into the business.
Yeah, I feel like that has to be something that, like, if somebody were to, like, I don't know, they show up that first day that you're there, they fall into a coma, they wake up the last day that you're there, and it's like they think that it's a completely different universe that they've walked into.
Well, and the funny thing, is, again, as an older guy, not raised dealing with that kind of aspect that's ingrained in the life now, when you're growing up and you're young. The younger guys were so adaptive to the constant change. That was normal for them. And so they got onto it and got ahead of it so very quickly. For guys that didn't grow up in an environment where you had cell phones and video games, of that kind of quality, where things were constantly updating, where change was so constant, in the way that you interacted with technology, man, it was just harder to do that. It made it hard work and maybe created a little bit of a generation gap within the flying business, between guys that were prehistoric, if you will, and those who grew up more in an information system dominant kind of age.
Well, but to your credit, you were able to last for a long time, and I'm sure you obviously were incredibly successful. What was it like to win the Distinguished Flying Cross? Like, how does that happen?
That was a really a kind of a different mission. We had, the A-10's mission was primarily to conduct ground attack against enemy forces, tanks, armored personnel carriers, trucks, those kinds of things. We never envisioned being used to attack enemy air defenses. We never thought that was going to be, other than maybe reacting to, anti-aircraft artillery fire within a target area or something like that. And very early on in Operation Desert Storm, we discovered that we were operating in an environment where higher caliber, longer range, more capable enemy air defenses were intact and were continuing to operate. And there was this decision, this determination in the theater of operations to take the approach of attacking those systems directly, which means flying into their range, getting close, well within their range, flying against systems that are designed to shoot you down. We never imagined that. We never envisioned that. And I was tasked to fly the very first A-10 mission against an Iraqi surface-to-air missile system in the country of Kuwait. And I still remember sitting in the mass briefing and listening to the officer of the day giving me kind of the overview of the mission. I was sitting in one row. I was a flight of 4. I had 3 guys sitting behind me who I was going to lead on this mission. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my goodness, this is crazy. We're going to die. And I said to myself, okay, man, before you get up and you turn around and you look these guys in the eye, man, you better not have an ounce of fear. You better look them in the eye and say, listen, man, we're going to go do this, and give them every sense that you're confident. In other words, keep what's going on the inside off your face. And we did that, and we got up, and I got up, and to their credit, I looked at those guys and I saw the same look looking back at me. And we went into a briefing room. We kind of drew up how we were going to do it, came up with our plan, and we went out there. We were engaged not only by the surface-to-air missile system, but it was ringed by anti-aircraft artillery batteries that were shooting at us the entire time. It was a pretty harrowing mission, but we were able to evade all of the attempts to shoot us down in the course of it, and we ended up destroying that battery. It was the first time that an A-10 was used for that kind of a mission to that effect. And it was quite a day. It was one of those days where I thought I wasn't going to live through.
Okay.
Yeah.
Describe that feeling that you have, like when you're coming home, like when you guys have succeeded, mission accomplished, and you're coming back. What's put us in your mind, like as you're coming back when you land? What's the first thing that somebody said to you?
When you're coming back, you feel good. You feel an intense amount of satisfaction. You feel exhausted because really it's been adrenaline that's been pushing you through it. And when it's all said and done, the body then just kind of has that letdown from the adrenaline. And, so there's both a sense of satisfaction. You're excited. Mm-hmm. You want to go back. You're already running through in your mind how you're going to recreate the mission, tell all the guys how you did it. It's also important because, that was a mission it was a new one we were being given. And so going back and recreating it and really understanding the lessons learned so that when we go back out, we do it well and maybe even do it better the next time. All of those things are going on. How do I share what's happened? What's my takeaway? How can we do this better next time? What did I learn from doing this? That's going to help the next guys do it to do well. And wars like that, it's constant adaptation, because you're fighting living, breathing, thinking enemies as well. And so that's all kind of running through. But yeah, you're pretty excited when you do something like that. There's high fives. There's, there might be, if it were in a different environment other than Saudi Arabia, which was an alcohol-free environment, you might have a couple of guys coming out and bringing beers to the plane for you, to do those kinds of things. But you definitely feel satisfied, but you also have you got to work through that and realize that the mission doesn't stand alone. It's part of a learning process that keeps you ahead of the curve in battle, and to go back and make sure that together we continue to grow and learn so that we're capable of going out and doing those missions and dealing with any adjustments that, an enemy might potentially make as well.
Okay. How fast is that?
Like football, yeah. You got to come back and you've got to debrief and you've got to figure out, okay, the next time we play these guys, it's not going to be the same. They've already seen what we bring to the fight. We got to go about it differently. Same kind of thought process.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. How soon is the turnaround for like a debrief after a mission like that? I'm assuming it's fairly quick, so all the details stay
It's,
fresh. But
it is. It's very quick, Dom. I mean, you normally you spend a little bit of time to kind of get your ducks in a row before you do that, but then you get right into it. You do it while it's fresh.
okay, all right. So moving on to something a little different. How long have you been writing? Like, have you always been a writer?
I have uh, I've been writing for a good bit of my life. One of the byproducts of going through a master's program is that master's degrees are very writing intensive,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not just writing for the fun of it. You're writing for professors that are well versed in the topic, and usually pretty good in their own right in doing that. So my first master's degree was one that I had to take when I was coming up for promotion to major back in the mid 90s. And then went through another one, later on in the 90s, and then another one in the mid aughts, 2005 or so. All three of those were just intensive in their writing demands. So I did a lot of writing. I did a lot of writing that was evaluated. I did a lot of writing that had to be to a high level. And along the way, I had professors that kind of encouraged me and said, "Man, you're pretty good at this." And I kind of said, "Well, I really have a full-time demanding job. This isn't something I can get into." And when I went to seminary, again, very writing intensive, and the same kind of feedback. And so when I graduated from seminary, I got called up to the church where we're at now, north of New York City, and I again had one of those moments where there was a train of thought in my mind, and I began to get that sense that God was saying, "Listen, I want you to turn this into a book. I want you to write." And again, as I've done so oftentimes in my life, I looked up and I said, "Lord, I've got a full-time job, and it's pretty demanding. I'm not, and by the way, who's going to bother picking up a 50-plus-year-old guy who's never written a book before? Same type of narrative over again." And he wouldn't let me let it go. And so I started writing back in 2019, the book that would ultimately become the Gospel of Redemption and Restoration story. And when I was done with it, I looked up and I said, "Okay, Lord, I'm done." And he goes, "Okay, now put it out there." I said, come on, man. And so I got onto a Christian website that has publishers that do Christian works. And you post a sample of your work on there. And I said, "Oh, I did that." And I said, "Okay, Lord, good. I've done that too. I'm done." And it was one of those things you just don't expect it. And about 2 weeks later, I had a publisher contact me and said, "Hey, we like your work. Um, can you give us a full manuscript?" And I said, "Yeah, I can." I remember I texted my wife. I couldn't believe it. It was like
Mm-hmm.
a dog that spends his whole life chasing a car and finally catches a bumper. And now what do you do? You know? And I called her and I said, "Baby, I've got a publisher that's picked me up." And from there, it just went into kind of the long process of working with the editors and working through it, and getting it to publication. And it was published back in August of last year. So short answer is I've been writing for a long time, Dom, but this is the first book I've published. I have had a couple of papers that have been published over the years, but never a book.
Okay.
And
So have you thought
we're
of? Oh,
on
go ahead.
number 2 as we speak.
You're working on number two.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Is it the same theme, or are we?
It's
Okay.
it's still a based on a Christian topic. It's going to be it's going to be built around. It's going to be really my thoughts and sense of kind of the overall message of one of the books in the Bible, the Book of Hebrews.
Okay.
And right now, the working title of it, and don't hold me to this, but the working title is "Neglecting a Great Salvation." And the gist of it is that the author of Hebrews really was addressing an audience that was beginning to fall away from this relationship, this life that Jesus Christ had called them to, and they were distracted in allowing their lives to get drawn away by other things. And as a result of it, the nature of their life was beginning to deteriorate and suffer because of that. And I really have a strong conviction that in America today, Dom, the church is allowing itself to just be drawn away by so many other things that, quite frankly, aren't what, in particular, the New Testament calls us to be and do and to focus on. If you really embrace the message of Jesus Christ, the gospel, which is the gist of the first book, the message is this: that God has intervened in our life for our good. He sent his one and only Son to do everything necessary to deliver us honestly from a destiny that our nature deserves, and to deliver us unto instead a destiny that he longs to give us. And along the way, he changes us and imparts to us, and I hope I've shared that with you, he imparts to us a life that Jesus Christ alone can give and can bring to pass. And when we cling to him, when we really seek him and follow him and make him our life's passion, he brings to pass what Jesus calls in the Gospels an abundant life, both now and into eternity. And to me, buddy, that's if you haven't picked up on it, that is, I love flying, but the message of what God has done for us through Jesus Christ is my great passion in life, and I will carry that to my last breath. And to me, it's a matchless existence. It's not a promise of ease. Quite frankly, Jesus, contradicted that notion when he said, hey, unless you're willing to deny yourself, take up your cross and follow me, you can't be my disciple. It's a call to a challenging life.
It is.
It's a call in a lot of ways to rub the world the wrong way, but to do it in a way that God says he will work through to reach people. And I think in a lot of ways, the church in America has traded that matchless existence by making instead the ministry, the mission, the life of the church be something that honestly looks like anything that the world could conjure up. And if Christ came and died and rose again to just simply make us look like the world around us, as Paul says in Galatians, if that's the case, then he died for nothing. He died to make us new creations, as the scripture says, and by God's grace to transform our character into a likeness of something that's pleasing to him and something that the people in the world desperately need. And that's my mission.
I can agree with that. That's really powerful. I really love the sentiment behind that. It's really special.
Okay.
So I know you like to write a lot. Are you reading anything these days, or any books that you'd recommend reading?
Yeah, I always have books in the queue. I am my reading interests are a bit eclectic.
Okay, so are mine. I love to hear it.
A book I'm reading right now is actually kind of an older work from the 80s by a historian named Sarah Bradford. It's a book about a figure in 19th century England who was one of England's most prominent prime ministers in the latter part of that century, a man named Benjamin Disraeli, who happened to be a Jewish man who was a British citizen who rose to become the prime minister of Great Britain, which is, especially in that day and age, was no easy thing. And so it's really a fascinating story to see how he persists, in particular through a lot of the prejudices and ways in which the deck was stacked completely against him to do that. And he turned out to be a remarkable prime minister, one of the greatest, I think, that Great Britain's ever had. So I'm doing that. The next one in the queue, and for the life of me, buddy, you got to forgive me. I can't remember his name, but it's a book titled 2041. And it's essentially a book that, as best as I can understand, you could probably Google it real quick if you want to, but it's talking about AI and how it is going to influence and change our culture, and in fact, how it's doing it already. We can kind of duel this and see who comes up with it faster here.
I'm looking at the title. It sounds really familiar, but I as you're describing it, it's like it's escaping me. I hate when that happens. Like it sounds so familiar, like I should know what it is.
Yeah, hang on.
10 Visions for Our Future. Chen, I can't
It's
pronounce
uh,
that last
it's
name.
uh, it's Chin Kifan.
Kifan.
Uh, and AI 2041 is the title of it. And I kind of glanced through, the way I do when I look at a book. I look in the back for bibliography and notes. I look in the front, the table of contents. I read the liner notes, and then get into a brief introduction. And I saw it, and it looked pretty fascinating. You want to talk about how the world's going to change in coming years. We may experience some exponential kinds of change here
Mm-hmm.
in the coming years, buddy, and without really any prerequisite roadmap to understand how to navigate that change. There aren't too many things that rhyme, I think, with what AI is going to bring into our existence if it's really unleashed uh, in the fullness that I think it probably can be. We can probably do it now. I think there's probably ethical and moral restrictions that are constraining that. But what happens if those constraints are removed? What kind of world are we going to live in? You know,
Okay. Yeah,
my
I
car
that's something that I.
driving it and I only have a vote, for example.
Mm-hmm.
What's life going to look like when that happens? And that's just a benign
Wow.
example of the changes that we might be facing.
Yeah. All right, I'm definitely gonna check that out because I'm looking for something new to be reading actually.
And then, of course, you can always look at the Gospel of Redemption and
Yeah,
Restoration.
exactly. I'm gonna be linking that on all the books we've mentioned in the show notes, but we
Yeah.
got the gospel number one, I promise.
Yeah, thank you, buddy.
Um, I'm sure you've gotten this question a billion times. Okay. Um, have you ever seen anything in the sky that you wouldn't like? You can't figure out what it is exactly. That way, we can leave it ambiguous enough that it could have been a cloud. It could have been anything.
Do you want to talk tic tac, buddy, or no?
I want to talk Tic Tac, but first, I want to ask if you've seen anything.
I have never seen anything that I couldn't observe, um, evaluate, and fairly reasonably conclude what I'm looking at. I've never seen anything that confounds my understanding. Seen things that amaze me. Looking at the Milky Way over southern Iraq with night vision goggles in the middle of the desert at night is awe-inspiring, especially when there's a comet in the sky, like there was, one of the deployments when I was over there.
That's really
But I
cool.
still understood what I was looking at.
Mm-hmm.
It was unfathomable, but I wasn't questioning its origin or identity.
Okay. All right. Cool. Yeah. So here,
Yeah.
I will share screen with you, and for everyone listening at home, this will be the first episode you can view actually on YouTube, and you should be able to on Spotify as well. But I'm going to be pulling up the Nimitz Tic Tac video footage. It's not the report that it became famous on was from Commander David Fravor. This is not the video of his experience. This is they sent somebody in right afterwards, like because I
It
think
was
he needed a
Underwood, if I'm
refill.
not mistaken, buddy.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was Underwood.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, I think his name was. I have it right here. Is it Cody Underwood?
I didn't. I'm not aware of his first name, buddy. I just know
Mm,
the.
it's all right. I will
Yeah.
pull this up and then let's get this screen share.
Yeah.
All right. Can you see?
Yep, I got it.
All right. Let me. I'll get this sound off.
Yeah, and you can see all the cues they're showing. They're helping you interpret the different symbology on the sensor display there. He's at about 20,000 feet. You can tell that there. The object that he's observing looks for the most part to be co-altitude with him. The sensor is not slewed to the left or the right, so he's pointed right at him, Dom, as he's going. He's got it in a 2 zoom, now back out to a 1 zoom. You're going to see him go back and forth, 1 to 2 and 2 to 1. He's also going to switch back and forth routinely from black hot, white hot. All that really means to you is it's a different way of viewing the environment and contrasting it with the thing you're observing. So sometimes you'll see that the Tic Tac's black, sometimes it's white. It's not changing color. He's just changing how the sensor is functioning and doing that. And you'll notice that when he zooms back out to a 1 zoom, it gets much smaller. When he goes into 2 zoom, it'll get bigger. The cursors there, that those 2 lines on either side of the Tic Tac show that the sensor's tracking it, it's locked on. Yeah, and pretty much remaining co-altitude. I know one of the things that was fascinating in this encounter is that the object was moving at a very slow speed, and then boom, you see it do what it just does there. He did not slew the sensor. You could rapidly slew the sensor to make it sort of look like that. He didn't. It just flew very rapidly out of the field of view in ways that honestly, in terms of performance, it's hard to find anything in your Rolodex that says, "Oh, I know such and X, this platform is capable of doing that." Nothing in my prerequisite experience or knowledge or encounters that says that something like that can go from pretty much a steady state position to just this immediate acceleration out of the field of view of the screen. And the other thing, and one of the things I think that Fravor brought up, it was either Fravor or Underwood, but that the reason you could detect an object like that is because basically of heat differences in the infrared spectrum. And so normally anything that we're aware of that we're familiar with that flies, if it's going to move that quickly, it's going to have to produce thrust to do that. And anything that produces thrust is going to produce a heat trail or a heat signature. So if that were something like a traditional jet engine causing that acceleration, you'd see a long plume back behind the Tic Tac as well. Mm-hmm. So you can understand why those guys were a bit confounded and astonished by what they saw. What do you do with that? I don't know if you want to go into that.
I'm more than down to go into it because I wish there was more to see there, because obviously, I mean, I don't have any. I have a very base knowledge of things shouldn't be able to break the view of the sensor like that.
Yeah.
But it's not like it's enough for us to like sit here or for me to sit here and say, oh, I know for sure that that's something from this other world, because we could find out 10 years from now that the military was testing some brand new thing that, I don't know. Every morning I've worked this job that I go in at like 4 a.m. and I see planes fly over all the time, and damn near often enough it looks like something that's moving significantly faster than anything in the sky, and you're just like, wow, I understand how people can see something and be like, I've never seen anything move like that, but I've never seen anything move like that.
Yeah. Well, and neither did those F-18 pilots, and neither have I. So what do you do with that? Well, the first thing to remember is that regardless of what the 3-letter acronym is that they come up with, it always begins with a U, which is unidentified. Unidentified, aerial vehicle, unidentified flying object. U is always going to be the first word, whatever the nickname du jour is for that. Mm-hmm. And what unidentified means is that there is nothing in the body of knowledge or experience that we possess to come to any conclusion about what it is that can rise above the level of speculation. So anything that I share or anyone else shares at this point is speculation, unless you go to case one. And case one is what you alluded to, that there really is a capability that exists that is man-made that we're just not aware of. And in that case, the people in the know, it is unidentified. They're very well aware of what it is. Mm-hmm. So it's very possible that something like this is really a capability that already exists. It just hasn't been disclosed broadly, and in fact has been kept under very tight wraps. Is there precedent for that? Yeah. I mean, the greatest one in military operations is nuclear weapons. Mm-hmm. Until bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, only a very, very, very small community of people knew that this kind of capability existed. And when it was unleashed and revealed to the world, it was very much a reaction just like the TikTok would produce. Oh my goodness, what is this? This is light years beyond anything that we thought was possible. So there clearly is precedent, for our country or other governments to develop capabilities that remain very close hold because of what they do. The second conclusion, and Fravor leans in this direction, that it's alien in origin. Again, anything that we're sharing here is speculation because we don't possess the requisite body of knowledge and experience to rise above that.
Right.
So if it's alien, where I struggle with saying this is alien in origin is think about it this way: what we know about the observable universe, the vast spaces, the incredible distances, the remarkable capability, the mind-boggling capability that would be necessary to get from somewhere in the universe to here. A, to detect that there is life here, and B, to get your way here is so incredible that we can't fathom it.
Right.
If it takes that kind of capability to get here, then why do you not have the capability to mask your presence from a sensor like an electro-optical or an infrared sensor or the naked eye? And the only reason you would refrain from doing that is if you want to be observed. And if you want to be observed, then how come you haven't made contact? And so every encounter really turns into the flying equivalent of Sasquatch. Wow, they must exist, but man, we can't ever get past the grainy photo, So that's a possibility. A third possibility is that somewhere in the future, humanity becomes capable of time travel. And that this is simply an example of greater capabilities yet in the future that are coupled with the ability to traverse time and to go back in time. Again, speculation. It's a thought that
it is really cool to think of, though.
As a Christian, I introduce a fourth possibility to that. The Bible depicts a reality in the universe that isn't simply populated by what we see. The scriptures talk extensively about the fact that there are beings, there are powers, there are principalities that exist, that God has created that aren't invisible to us, and yet have the ability to manifest themselves in a multitude of different ways. And one of the most fascinating places in the scriptures where you see that is in the book of Ezekiel, where Ezekiel describes a manifestation of angelic beings that look, he describes it like a wheel within a wheel. And the movements he describes are remarkably like the movement that we see with the tic-tac. Rapid, left, right, up, down, without making a sound. And these incredible movements that obviously for someone like Ezekiel, goodness, 2,500 years ago, trying to grapple with what he's seeing, that are very similar. So again, purely speculation, because I don't have the body of knowledge or requisite experience to rise above speculation. That to me is a fourth possible example.
Yeah.
A lot of people have questioned the credibility of Fravor and Underwood, and I can't remember Fravor's wingman. She's retired now, but I've got to tell you, buddy, knowing the nature of the beast in a fighter pilot community, publicly advocating for being a witness to a phenomenon like this and coming to conclusions about it is not the path to success in that community. It's the path to ridicule.
Right.
So they don't have any motivation for fabricating a fantastical story. I really believe they saw what we saw. I really believe they were genuinely confounded by it. And I really believe they're wrestling with what it is that they saw and what they do with that. So I would not even remotely fall into the camp of someone who would call into question the veracity of their testimony. I believe they saw what they saw. I don't necessarily agree maybe with the range of speculation they might take as to what it might be.
Yeah, I don't remember who said it, but there are a lot of people that are starting to believe that like these are aliens that are traveling interdimensionally. And while it's a fun idea to consider, we don't have any knowledge that that's even possible. So just that being the first thing people jump to in speculation is kind of weird. But I'm not sure if you read the June UAP report that they came out with. I think it was last year or June of 2020. They investigated 144 different U.S. Military officials that had seen something in the sky, and they were showing like little pictures and whatnot. But I was talking to somebody the other day. They were loosely mentioning that they had other evidence, but they couldn't show it because it would it'd be like a national security risk, like showing people like the extent of the ability that we have to like see stuff.
Yeah.
Which kind of leads me to believe that if there is something actually out there, that they have a pretty damn clear video of something somewhere that they just are loosely trying to break up, like how they're, I don't know, because you're hearing it more and more now from accredited places that wouldn't ever consider saying anything like that 30 years ago. Like just the idea of the official government report for it. Oh my goodness, I'm pretty sure NASA just hired like 20 theologians to study. Yeah, so I don't know. Like I feel like there's got to be a point like where there's smoke, there's fire, but we don't have a smoking gun.
We don't, and the reasons to be close hold with the full details. Either A, it's it's an otherworldly presence, and you don't want to provoke panic, or B, it's this worldly presence, and you don't want to provoke panic, or you don't want to reveal capabilities.
Yeah.
But again, buddy, it's for me, it's a nice coffee table conversation. It's fun to talk about. It's fun to speculate. But I would never, none of it rise to the level of richness of information that one would need to come to a sound conclusion and base both their wits and their reputation on that conclusion.
Yeah, I agree 100%. All right, this is my last question I always ask. What is one conspiracy theory you believe to be true? All this time I'm talking about UFOs. This is one that I need you to believe it.
You have probably asked one of the most anti-conspiratorial theory persons in the world.
That's wonderful. That's what I want. I need to hear what you believe.
I don't, I don't have a conspiracy theory that I believe. Going back to my prevailing passion, my Christian faith. One conspiracy theory I can tell you is absolutely not true is the conspiracy theory that Christ didn't rise from the grave, but that the body was stolen. And the story of his resurrection was manufactured. If you ever read Lee Strobel's book, The Case for Christ, it's a book he began writing as an atheist, working as a legal reporter, I think for the Chicago Tribune. Strobel starts out by trying to disprove the resurrection. And in the process of going through that, comes to the conclusion that in terms of an ancient historical event, there is no more greatly validated event in human history than the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And along the way, Strobel came to believe that there is a God, and came to place his faith and trust in Christ as he did. So I know that is perhaps a subtle and underhanded way for me to get one last message in here when we close. But
it's okay.
No, dude, I don't do conspiracy theories. I think honestly they bring out the worst in us in a lot of ways. And the one that I reject the most is the one I've just shared.
Okay, that's fair. I'll start it. I'll start including that. Like, what is one theory you reject the most? Okay. All right. Well, that is all for me. Make sure you check out Mike's book, The Gospel. I just lost it. A Redemption and Restoration Story. Available, I saw on Amazon, FoxtailBookshop.com, Barnes and Noble. Is there anywhere else that it could be picked up?
Yeah, I can. I have a Facebook page, Tom. It's pastor and author Mike O'Dowd, and there's a shop on the page. And if you order it there, I can give you a personally signed copy.
Okay, I'll make sure I link all of that in the notes. Thank you so much for coming on, Mike.
Hey, Don, thank you so much. I thoroughly enjoyed this time, buddy, and I wish you and your show well. You do an excellent job. You are well prepared and engaging, and I highly recommend and will highly recommend your show to anybody that's willing to listen to a thoughtful and interesting hour or so. All
Okay.
right, brother.
Thank you so much. I really
You're
appreciate
welcome.
that.
God bless.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Dominic Mills podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. It was a real pleasure to have Mike on. Now, please remember to rate the show 5 stars or to leave a review. I'll read this one from J Herbie96. Worth checking out. A well done podcast with lots of unique guests. Dominic does a great job and really keeps you invested in the show. Worth multiple listens. Again, it really means the world to me whenever I get to read one of these. So please, if you have the time, take the 10 seconds it takes to do either. That's all for me. Stay safe, and as always, stay curious.